Howdy howdy. Today's talk is about understanding the world because understanding is everything. It's Frank in Sydney, 8:30 in the morning on Saturday 17th of December 22. Most people are too busy to learn and understand what's going on around them, so they just take what they're told and believe it. Saves a lot of time and energy. Just similar to if you're in a village and you're a baby and the adults tell you not to go down to the lake because there's crocodiles in there that will eat you. You just have to believe them. There's no point testing the waters, is there, when you're a tasty snack for a crocodile. So there is merit to this system, but there's also a limit to its usefulness. It kind of carries through today to the extreme where you have the corporations running everything, and they can pay off governments to go along with helping the bottom line of the corporation, and so you can get people convinced to do things that are absolutely only beneficial to the profits of certain corporations and not beneficial to themselves at all. And this is the really most common problem I can see in the developed world right now. But I'm sure this will change when there's more automation and people have more time to learn for themselves and study things without taking things as they're told straight away. They have time to question and study and get the true idea rather than propaganda. As you age and you go through lots of changes in life, you learn the importance of meditation. It's a big word for quite simply clearing all the clutter from your mind so your mind has time to work as it should. And it's extremely simple to do. You do it just one breath at a time. Just take one breath and concentrate on feeling your body, feeling the breath, and keeping all other thoughts out of your mind. Then take another breath and do the same, and repeat until you feel yourself in a state of bliss, which you will. Okay, I don't think it's really necessary, but I will go over how religions have been used by political systems to rule the masses. So basically it's just meditation is religion. That's why you feel good when you've been to church, because you've kind of cleared your mind by thinking of things like God and all important forces in the universe, rather than trivial things that just clutter up your mind. But unfortunately, this is like a TV station that has a worthwhile program, but it's cutting with commercial breaks depending on what belief system you are brought up in or have decided to go with. So unfortunately it's been used sometimes for just greed of the powers that be to control the masses, or in the case of, say, the Arabs, they've used it to migrate from their almost hopeless home territory in the desert to the most fertile places in the world just by the use of efficient military, a military that has been properly programmed through meditation, or they call it the Muslim faith, because it sounds a lot nicer than brainwashing people or making people's minds efficient so that they can divide and conquer the world for themselves. It doesn't sound nice at all when you put it that way, but it does work, and it has worked. The Jews were the first ones to make use of this system, and then that broke away originally to the Christians, who made their religion a bit nicer. And in Asia, the Brahmins took the lead, and Buddha made that religion a bit nicer and more palatable. And then later on, I think only like about 1300 years ago, the Arabs made use of it to make a super efficient army and a super efficient community that was valued honesty and trust, which is important, and also efficient fighting forces that managed to spread themselves far and wide across the known world. Okay, this is a really interesting subject. The dilemma people have about discrimination on race, creed, or sexual preference. It's quite simply survival of the fittest. The Europeans had a really hard time in the last 2,000 years, I think, with volcanic cover across Europe. They had winters that lasted for years where it was impossible to grow anything. It was so cold and icy. So whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So the Europeans, some of them survived this and bred themselves up as the weather stabilized to be the most organized and hard-working races in the world. And that's why the Europeans are now still leading, because they're hard workers and they're smart. They had to be to survive that last 2,000 years in Europe, which was very, very difficult. It was a lot easier in Egypt and in the Middle East. There was oases where they could grow a little bit. They didn't have to be too smart to survive freezing cold, endless winters. Egypt was a little bit smarter because they had to work out how to make use of the flooding of the Nile so they could grow crops in the silt. So they worked out a calendar and become quite efficient. So they led the world for a while until the Europeans come out of their semi-ice age and took the lead. Now, I guess Russia is still in this kind of semi-ice age, so they've never really been able to thrive because it's such a bad climate far north. But the Europeans, the Chinese are the other ones worth mentioning because they had a reasonable climate for thousands of years, but probably had it a little bit too easy. Not as difficult a time as the Europeans had. It really weeded out the dead wood. So anyway, in the last few hundred years, the Europeans have really come to the fore, or in the last 500 years, with the invention of the printing press and lots of other technological advances. And having this technology, they were able to divide and conquer the rest of the world during the colonization period of the last few hundred years, where most of the Europeans have made the best of moving to the Americas, which is quite an easy climate and fertile climate. So they were able to wipe out the indigenous race, same as the English have done in Australia. And they've tried to go to Africa but been driven out because they weren't able to completely wipe out the indigenous race in Africa. Same in Asia. So you have the Asians taking advantage of the European technology now and becoming head and head with the Europeans thanks to their hard work ethics. The Africans were able to keep the Europeans out by just making it totally unpleasant for them, because they weren't able to wipe the Africans out. They had a pretty good go in South Africa, and they've turned it into a Western developed country, unlike anywhere else in Africa, which is still very indigenous. So now, the whites are almost been driven out of South Africa, which could take that back to where it is placed more similar to the rest of Africa. And me being an Australian and being away for a long time, I've come back to see that the white Australians are bowing to the indigenous race and acknowledging that they were settled here before the whites. But the Aborigines have never had to worry about anything in their thousands and thousands of year history. It's been quite an isolated island, so it was never colonized by the Asians, and only in the last few hundred years by the Europeans. So the indigenous population is quite small and is still the same as it was when settled by the whites. But the indigenous population hasn't had the hundreds and hundreds of years to adapt and mutate to Western methods and Western work ethics and Western tolerance for disease and things like alcohol. So it's all new to them. This takes thousands of years for the human body to mutate, to adapt to these conditions. We also have reverse discrimination between males and females, where you have like rules that there has to be so many males and so many females in a workforce or board of directors. and taking it further, there has to be so many gay and lesbian in like a group or club as well, which could also lead to the type of reverse discrimination that we can see, we have seen in South Africa, rather than taking things on merit and taking things on people who have true leadership skills, regardless of their race, creed, or colour. I think eventually developed communities will come to the conclusion that race, creed, colour and sexual preference should not even be acknowledged, let alone put into a colouring by numbers system as far as building an intelligent system goes. So that's my talk for today. I hope it was clear and it will give you some food for thought.